Psychology of people who treat their birthday like a normal day. It's one of the most curious contradictions in our society, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, we are raised almost from birth to see our birthday as this huge, monumental event.
A non-negotiable celebration.
Right. It's the one day where society says, you must be celebrated. You're supposed to be the center of attention.
Yes, the social contract basically demands you become the center of the universe for 24 hours, whether you actually want to be or not.
Nah.
There's this gravitational pull toward mandatory fun.
Mandatory fun. That's a great way to put it. And yet you meet people, and maybe you, listening, are one of them, who just actively dread that pull. They don't just want a quiet day. They crave the calm, predictable routine of a completely average Tuesday. They just want the day to pass. No fanfare, no spotlight.
The question is why? Why choose the mundane over what's supposed to be magnificent?
Exactly. And that is the behavioral puzzle we're going to try and unlock today. We're going to look beyond just, I'm modest, and really analyze the psychological reasons, the temperament traits that make someone choose to normalize their birthday.
It's about understanding that for a lot of people, avoiding that spotlight isn't about being sad or antisocial. It's a strategy, a form of profound self-preservation.
We've gathered a lot of observations and some really fascinating behavioral research to unpack this. And to make sense of it all, we're going to be looking at it through two major psychological lenses.
That's right. The first is all about your internal wiring, the neurobiology of your temperament, focusing specifically on introversion and how an introvert's brain processes energy and social demands.
And the second lens is a really powerful cognitive idea that explains why high-stakes, abnormal events can be so risky for our mental health.
Yeah.
It's called the exceptionality effect.
And together, those two ideas really explain the logic behind wanting to just keep things normal.
Okay, so let's unpack this. When we look at the immediate gut-level reasons people give for avoiding birthday fanfare, what's the first thing that comes up?
It's almost always a fundamental discomfort with high social stimulation.
And the burden of high expectations.
Exactly. People describe the feeling as maximum cringe. It's this sense of being involuntarily exposed, like you've been pushed onto a stage without a script.
I think we all know the perfect example of this. The one that causes almost universal dread.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
The moment in a restaurant when the servers start walking towards your table, singing.
The birthday song ambush. Yes. Yeah. It's like a tiny 45-second performance anxiety workshop you never signed up for.
It's pure social paralysis. Because what are you supposed to do? Do you sing along? That feels so self-aggrandizing.
So weird.
Do you clap for yourself? Even weirder.
No, you just have to sit there staring into the middle distance with a frozen smile, praying for it to end.
Praying for the cake to arrive and offer some sort of distraction. It turns a moment of supposed joy into this incredibly awkward social performance.
And that performative aspect is key. It feeds directly into another big issue people have, the feeling that the kindness is forced.
Right. We saw that observation a lot, that people feel like everyone is pushed to be nice on that one day. It's an obligation, not a genuine feeling.
And when that kindness feels inauthentic, the attention doesn't feel like a warm spotlight. It's more like a cold, harsh, clinical light where you're being judged on how well you're performing birthday person.
So it's not the attention itself, it's the inauthentic nature of it and the pressure to perform gratitude for a performance being staged for you.
Precisely. And if we connect that back to temperament, this is classic introversion. For someone wired that way, that kind of attention is described as absolutely painful.
It's just draining.
Completely draining. And it's important to remember, this isn't about being shy. Many introverts aren't shy at all. It's that their brains find small talk and excessive sensory input, all the noise, the faces, to be intensely exhausting.
A birthday party is basically engineered for maximum small talk and noise.
It is. An introvert can burn through their entire social battery in like 30 minutes at an event like that. You'll see them retreating to the edges of the room just to get a moment of internal quiet to recharge.
Asking them to endure a 3-hour party is like, I don't know, asking someone to run a marathon on a sprained ankle.
It's a physical challenge with real consequences.
Okay, so that covers the immediate social discomfort. But what about the people where this is more of a defense mechanism, something that's built up over time? What role does negative conditioning play?
This is a huge factor. For some people, it's not just about discomfort, it's about active self-protection from expected pain.
So past birthdays have been associated with bad experiences.
Yes. Past disappointments, trauma, conflict. The brain is a learning machine. And if it learns that birthday equals pain, it will do everything it can to avoid that stimulus in the future.
We saw some really, really heavy anecdotes about this. One person mentioned discovering their partner was cheating on their birthday.
We saw that one a couple of times, actually. It's an experience that would instantly and probably permanently link that specific day to betrayal and trauma, not celebration.
Of course. And what are childhood experiences? Those seem to form a really strong foundation for this.
Absolutely. We see so many accounts where birthdays were a reliable source of, well, emotional abuse or extreme guilt, people recalling their parents finding ways to embarrass them or constantly bringing up how much money was being spent.
Or that one crushing line, your birthday's not about you.
That's a tough one. Or the story of the parents who would always end up yelling at each other over what gift to buy or which restaurant to go to. So the child learns that their special day is actually a trigger for family conflict.
The brain just learns to avoid it.
It learns to protect itself. And that's not even touching on the financial aspect. The guilt that gets ingrained in a child when they're repeatedly told there's no money to waste on birthdays.
That feeling can persist right into adulthood, right?
Yeah.
A feeling of shame around spending money on yourself.
It absolutely can. All of these experiences condition the person to just lower their expectations to zero. It becomes a psychological defense strategy.
Internal contract becomes, it's just easier on my heart not to celebrate.
It is. It's a preemptive strike against disappointment. If you don't care, if you don't invest emotionally, you can't get hurt again.
And you can really see how deep that conditioning goes when you look at how long it takes to heal. One person mentioned needing hard emotional work with my therapist just to start making new, happier memories on that day.
That says it all, doesn't it? It shows that for some, treating the day as normal isn't pessimism. It's a radical act of self-care. It's a therapeutic choice.
Okay, so that need for self-protection also brings us to a third reason, which is maybe a little more straightforward. The simple problem of social effort, the sheer energy it takes.
Yes, the strong preference we saw to just have the day off left alone. Treating it like a sacred day of rest.
Not a day of performance.
Right. Solitude as true rest, not the obligation of having to entertain. Because even for a small celebration, if it's your birthday, you're the host, you're the emotional anchor, and that takes a ton of energy.
People are choosing what they call the antisocial thing, just not wanting to entertain. They'd rather recharge with a quiet hobby than manage the moods and conversations of a group of people.
And this is especially true if your job is already socially demanding. If you're a teacher, a manager, a nurse, anyone who spends their entire workday performing emotional labor and managing social cues.
The last thing you want on your day off is more of the same.
Exactly. Your day off is for your brain to finally disengage, not to be filled with new, equally draining social tasks.
There's a quieter, maybe more painful layer here too, though. The fear of rejection or loneliness.
Yes, that's a powerful driver. If someone genuinely believes nobody cares, or they think, I don't have many friends, so a party would just remind me of that, then trying to celebrate becomes an unbearable risk.
Because if you plan something and only a couple of people show up, that feels like a very public, very concrete confirmation of that fear.
It feels like objective data proving you're not cared for. So by minimizing the day, by treating it as normal, you avoid that vulnerability. You control the narrative. You can't be disappointed by a low turnout if you never planned anything in the first place.
It's another calculated move to prevent pain.
It's all about minimizing emotional risk.
This is where things get really fascinating, because now we can shift from those social and emotional reasons to some pure cognitive science. Beyond just the discomfort, there's a powerful psychological mechanism that makes exceptional events, like a big hyped-up birthday, inherently risky ground for regret. And we're talking about the exceptionality effect.
This is such a critical concept for understanding how we manage risk in our daily lives. The exceptionality effect is a cognitive bias where we feel a much stronger negative emotional response. We're talking regret, self-blame, a sense of injustice when a bad thing happens as a result of an exceptional or abnormal action.
Compared to when the exact same bad thing happens during a routine or normal action.
Exactly.
So your example from before.
Yeah.
If I always drive to work on Main Street and I get into a fender bender, I feel bad. But if, on a whim, I decide to take a scenic back road for a change and the same accident happens, I feel so much worse.
So much worse. The deviation is what amplifies the pain.
Why? What's going on in the brain there?
It comes down to something called norm theory, which was developed by Daniel Kahneman and Dale Miller back in the 80s. The theory says that when something bad happens, our minds don't just process the reality of the event, they immediately engage in what's called counterfactual thinking.
The what if or if only game.
Precisely. We automatically compare what happened to an imagined alternative where it didn't happen. And when the negative event follows an exceptional action like taking that scenic route, the counterfactual is incredibly easy and painful to construct.
If only I had stuck to my routine.
If only I had just done what I normally do, this would have been avoided. It makes the negative outcome feel more preventable and therefore more your fault, which skyrockets the feeling of regret and self-blame.
Okay, let's make this really concrete with the original experiments. They really drive the point home.
Right. So the first one is the classic hitchhiker scenario. Researchers presented participants with a story about two men who both pick up a hitchhiker and then get robbed.
Right.
Mr. Smith picks up hitchhikers all the time. It's part of his routine. For him, getting robbed was, an unfortunate but foreseeable risk of his normal behavior. Mr. Jones, on the other hand, never picks up hitchhikers. But on this one day, he breaks his own rule.
And he also gets robbed. And the finding was that people overwhelmingly judged that Mr. Jones, the guy who deviated from his routine, would feel way more regret.
Way more. Because his decision to break his own rule is seen as the direct cause. His path to avoiding the negative outcome was so clear. Just do what you always do. The counterfactual is screaming at him.
And the car accident scenario is the same principle, just a different context.
Exactly. Mr. Adams gets in an accident on his normal everyday route home. Mr. White gets in the same kind of accident, but he was taking an unfamiliar road just for a change of scenery.
And again, everyone concludes that Mr. White, the one who took the exceptional route, would suffer greater regret.
The brain punishes the deviation from the norm when things go wrong.
And this isn't just some old theory, right? It's been tested and retested.
Oh, it's incredibly robust. There have been tons of replication studies. A huge meta-analysis with over 4,000 participants confirmed a medium to strong effect. The effect size was G or 0.60, which in psychology is a very substantial and reliable finding.
Okay, so this is the crucial part. Let's connect this powerful psychological engine directly to avoiding birthday celebrations. How does this steer people toward just wanting a normal day?
Well, you have to define the routine first. If, for an individual, the established norm, their psychological safe space, is to treat their birthday as a quiet, low-key, normal day,
Then throwing a big party is the deviation.
it becomes the exceptional behavior. It's a conscious break from their established norm.
Like, wait a second, a birthday only happens once a year. Isn't it always an exceptional day by definition?
That's a great question. The key is that the norm here is psychological, not chronological. The norm isn't what you do 364 days a year. The norm is what is your established pattern for this specific event. If you've spent 10 years making sure your birthday is a quiet day at home, then that is your routine for that day.
Ah, I see. So the routine is quiet. The exceptional behavior would be to suddenly throw a huge party.
Exactly. And by doing that, you are raising the psychological stakes dramatically because of this effect.
So if I break my 10-year tradition of a quiet birthday and I throw that big exceptional party and it fails, maybe only a few people come, or there's a family argument.
The regret you feel isn't just simple disappointment.
It's amplified.
Massively amplified. You're not just sad the party was a dud, you're filled with self-blame, and the counterfactual is deafening. Why did I do this? I knew better. I should have just stayed home like I always do. The exceptionality effect guarantees the psychological cost of a failed deviation is far, far higher than the cost of just sticking to your safe, quiet routine.
So treating your birthday as a normal day is, in a way, the ultimate low-risk emotional strategy.
It's a perfect hedge against potential loss. You minimize your vulnerability and you completely eliminate that if-only loop that creates so much self-blame.
And this bias is so powerful it even shows up in things like legal cases.
It does. Studies have shown that in some judicial context, if a victim was doing something out of the ordinary when the crime or accident occurred, people sometimes recommend higher compensation for them because the tragedy feels more avoidable, more acute. It just shows how deeply we feel the psychological sting of a deviation gone wrong.
Wow. So for anyone who values stability and emotional safety, keeping the status quo on a day that's already loaded with pressure, it's just the most rational choice you can make.
You don't raise the stakes, so you can't lose big.
Okay, so let's shift from that cognitive bias to our second major factor. personality. The internal wiring of introverts, for whom a traditional birthday party isn't just awkward, it can be physically exhausting.
This is where we get into the neurobiology of it all. The difference between introverts and extroverts isn't just about behavior. It's about how their brains are wired for reward, specifically involving the neurotransmitter dopamine.
Dopamine, everyone's heard of it, the pleasure molecule, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll chemical. But what is it actually doing?
Well, that's a common misconception. Dopamine isn't really about pleasure itself. It's the motivation chemical. It's what drives you to seek rewards. It creates excitement about the possibility of pleasure.
So it pushes you toward new things, risks, social events.
Exactly. Extroverts have a highly active and sensitive dopamine reward system. They get a huge rush from external stimulation, loud parties, meeting new people, spontaneity. Their energy is literally generated by their surroundings.
So what's different about an introvert's brain? How do they process that same reward pathway?
Their brains are different. They tend to favor a different primary neurotransmitter pathway, one that uses acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is associated with things like deep concentration, memory, and internal reflection, activities you do quietly by yourself.
So they're geared for internal reward, not external seeking. What happens then when you put an introvert in that high dopamine, high stimulation party environment?
There's a fascinating study that looked at exactly this. They gave college students Ritalin, which is a stimulant that boosts dopamine in the brain. And they found that the extroverts in the group were far more likely to connect the feelings of bliss and reward they got from the drug with the external environment they were in.
The party was making them feel good.
Right. But the introverts, they did not make that same connection. They might have felt the chemical effect, but they didn't associate that good feeling with their surroundings.
So they don't get that high from the party itself.
Precisely. Their brain is wired to weigh internal cues, their own thoughts and feelings, much more heavily than external sensory input. So a loud party with tons of chatter and music isn't rewarding, it's just noise. It's just a massive energy drain without a neurological payoff.
And that explains the physical reaction people have, what they call the introvert hangover.
Yes, or social burnout. And it's not just a metaphor. It is a real physiological reaction to overstimulation.
What are the symptoms?
We saw it described in detail. It starts with physical things. Your ears might ring, your vision gets a little blurry, you might feel like you're hyperventilating. It can progress to severe headaches, nausea, and just this crushing fatigue. Your entire nervous system is overwhelmed.
The story about Rachel going to Oktoberfest is such a perfect illustration of this. The conflict between what you're supposed to enjoy and what your body is telling you.
It's such a powerful example of self-preservation winning out. Here she is in Germany at this experience of a lifetime that she paid a lot of money for.
The ultimate extroverted environment.
The ultimate. And as soon as she enters the crowd, the sensory overload just hits her. The deafening noise, the movement. She gets into the beer tent and feels agitated, shaky, and a little bit dizzy.
And even though she felt like she should tough it out, her body was screaming at her to leave.
And she listened. She chose the quiet of her hotel room over the sunk cost of the experience. And that decision really shows how deep the need for solitude is. For an introvert, it isn't just a preference, it's fuel, it's a biological necessity.
How does being alone actually restore that energy on a neurological level?
Solitude allows the brain to finally stop multitasking. There's research that shows just being near another person sucks up a certain amount of the brain's attention.
Because you're subconsciously tracking them.
You're constantly processing, what are they thinking? What do they expect from me? What's their emotional state? It's a low-level but constant energy drain. When you're finally alone, all of that processing bandwidth is freed up.
And your brain can finally catch up with itself.
It can. It can finally process all the thoughts and feelings that got stuffed away during a busy day or week. That reflection isn't just for recovery. It's crucial for mental clarity and creativity. A quiet birthday at home is literally the healthiest option for this personality type.
This processing difference even shows up in how our brains decide what's important to pay attention to. This is the P300 response, right?
That's right. The P300 is an electrical brainwave that fires about 300 milliseconds after you see something you deem significant. And studies found a really interesting difference between introverts and extroverts.
What did they find?
Extroverts showed a much bigger P300 response when they saw human faces compared to when they saw inanimate objects.
So their brains are automatically prioritizing people. Tagging them is more important.
Exactly. They are fundamentally wired to find the external social world more compelling. But introverts, Their P300 response was about the same for both faces and objects.
That's fascinating. So it's not that they don't care about people.
Not at all. It's that their brain gives equal significance to their rich inner world, their thoughts, their analysis of an interesting object or idea, as it does to the external social world.
And that one finding explains so much. It explains why an introvert can be completely fine with hanging out at home in their pajamas on a Friday night watching Netflix and not feel an ounce of FOMO.
Their brain isn't telling them they're missing out on the only thing that matters. Their inner world is just as significant.
So when you put all this together, the biological need for quiet processing and the cognitive need to avoid the high stakes of the exceptionality effect, the choice to have a normal birthday, it's not just a preference, it's the only logical self-protective choice.
It really is. But given that biological need for quiet, the real-world challenge becomes, how do you navigate a world that is constantly pushing you to celebrate in an extroverted way?
You have to fight against some really pervasive misconceptions.
The biggest one being that introversion is the same as being antisocial or rude.
Right, and they're not the same thing at all.
Not even close. We need to be really clear here. Introversion is a preference for calm, low-stimulation environments. Shyness is the fear of negative social judgment. You can be a very confident, unshy introvert.
Like Barack Obama,
Yeah.
a public speaker, a world leader.
But someone who famously needed 4 to 5 hours of alone time every single night just to recharge and think. He was introverted, but he wasn't shy or antisocial.
But because our society's default setting is extroverted, loud, expressive, always on, that quiet, reflective behavior gets misinterpreted all the time.
It leads to these really painful labels. People get called an arrogant prick, or an ice queen, or stuck up just for not wanting to engage in small talk or for needing a moment alone.
We saw that anecdote from Allison, who said that after high school, people told her they thought she was arrogant because she'd often sit alone and read.
Her internal state of quiet reflection was misread as a sign of disdain for others. And for people like Shelby or Amy, who are thoughtful introverts, it means they're constantly having to explain themselves to avoid causing offense.
Amy, the teacher, said she hated being called shy just because she prefers to not speak if I have nothing to say.
Her silence is purposeful, not fearful, but the social expectation forces her, and people like her, into this position of constant self-defense.
So when a high-pressure event like a birthday comes along, this all translates into one thing. You have to get really good at saying no. And that comes with a mountain of internalized guilt.
That misplaced guilt is the final hurdle. The key is to reframe what no means. Saying no to a social event, even a birthday party someone is throwing for you, isn't a harmful act.
You might cause disappointment, sure, but you're not actually hurting them.
Exactly. The potential harm you're averting is your own profound emotional exhaustion and burnout. The guilt isn't based in reality. It's based in our fear of the worst-case scenario.
We jump to, they're going to hate me or I'll never get invited again.
We catastrophize, when the much more likely outcome is that they'll be momentarily disappointed and then they'll move on. You have to focus on managing your own emotional response to the perceived risk of saying no.
So for the person who has decided, my birthday will be a normal, quiet day, what are the practical strategies for setting that boundary without causing a huge rift? How do you improve your no game?
There are a few key tactics. The first one is say it fast and say it firmly. Don't agonize over it for days. That just builds up your anxiety and leaves the other person hanging.
A quick no is often kinder than a long, drawn-out maybe.
Much kinder. It lets them adjust their plans and, crucially, it lets you stop the obsessive overthinking. Second tactic, propose an alternative.
That's a good one.
If the big, loud party is what's overwhelming, you can still show you value the relationship. You can say, you know, a big party sounds like a bit much for me right now, but I would absolutely love to grab a quiet coffee, just us, next week to celebrate.
So you're rejecting the format, not the person.
Precisely. It honors the relationship while protecting your boundary, and it plays to an introvert's strength. They often prefer deep one-on-one conversations anyway.
Okay, and the last part. What about those really close relationships? A partner, spouse, close family, who might take the request for a quiet day very personally.
That requires some education and vulnerability. The advice we saw from Brenda was to frame it as a physiological need, as wiring.
Like being sleepy.
Exactly. You can explain, it's just how I'm wired. If I don't get enough solitude, I start to crave it like an insomniac craves sleep. The most important part is to reassure them that you will return, and then you have to show them the benefit.
So when you come back from your 2 hours of quiet time, you show up recharged, patient, and genuinely present.
You demonstrate that the alone time isn't an act of rejection, but an act of relationship maintenance. You're not saying, I need to get away from you. You're saying, I need to recharge so I can be the best version of myself for you.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. Choosing that routine day preserves your energy, and ironically, it ensures that when you do decide to be social, you can do it authentically instead of showing up resentful and burned out.
So we've reached the end of our analysis, and I think it's clear that the choice to treat a birthday like a normal day is. It's not a quirk. It's a really complex and often very sophisticated psychological strategy.
It is. We looked at it through two big lenses. The first was the introvert's basic wiring, that fundamental preference for solitude and internal cues, which is driven by real, measurable differences in brain chemistry.
And the second was that powerful cognitive bias, the exceptionality effect. How maintaining a normal routine is a rational, low-risk strategy to avoid the amplified regret and self-blame that can come from a failed celebration.
The core conflict here is really between societal norms, which are almost always geared toward extroverted public celebration, and an individual's own internal temperament. So choosing a routine birthday becomes this quiet but powerful act of self-preservation.
It's an act of loyalty to your authentic self.
It's about protecting that rich inner world that's so easily disrupted by all the external noise and obligation.
Yeah.
It's a choice for peace, really.
And if we know that the research suggests people can have an equally good time, an equally fulfilling time, doing fun things alone as they would with other people, and that sometimes those solitary experiences become their most vivid and restorative memories, it makes you wonder, does this suggest that for some people, the greatest gift they can get on their birthday isn't an event, it's not a thing, but it's the radical permission, whether they give it to themselves or ask for it, to spend the day completely outside of the gaze of others.
A choice to prioritize their internal well-being over external validation.
Exactly. Something to think about the next time you ask someone what they're doing for their birthday.